Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this lockdown world. And today we have a very special guest, and I'm going to go right over to our host, Ned Denison.
Hello, everybody. My name's Ned. I'm a epic marathon swimmer with more than 50 big swims, including the Triple Crown. And I'm also the chairman of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Sarah, please make your introduction at least 4 times longer than that and tell people who you are, why you're on this call.
All right. Thanks, Ned. Thanks, Steve. I am on this call. I have been a psychologist, a clinical psychologist now for 20 years, and I've been working primarily with children, adolescents, and young adults. My history, though, comes from a very long history of swimming, which started when I was very, very young, and basically started swimming in the ocean around me. I grew up on Naples Island in Long Beach, and started swimming very much, probably about 12. I started getting into the real competitive working out from probably 3 to 5 hours a day, every day, 6 days a week. And so I moved up through that whole career of college swimming, and then getting into master swimming and swimming all the way through till now. There are a few breaks in between, which I'll explain later on why, how swimming affects your brain. And I'll explain that through my breaks in swimming that kind of threw me a loop. But I have had extensive experience with long distance swimming, grew up swimming in the ocean, primarily pools because I had to. But that's what really got me into and what helped me get my PhD. It was actually swimming. So had I not been swimming, I don't think I would have been able to manage my brain to get the PhD and to get into the doctoral programs, and to actually be able to see clearly what goes on in the brain of the kids and adolescents and young adults that I work with, who tend to be intense, high levels of intellect. Those are the ones that I work with primarily. They also tend to be very high level athletes, and very intense, could be very OCD people.
So
is that about 4 times?
That's okay. So as a young adult, that's quite intense. It's a moderate swimmer, goal driven. I'm waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm going, what do I do now?
It's exactly it.
What do I do now? And my goal is still there. What do I do? So what's happening?
Well, what's interesting is you say I wake up at 5 o'clock. You know what I've noticed? They're not waking up at 5 o'clock anymore. They actually are waking up later and later. And when they do wake up, they're still tired. And there's a quality that, at least through the weeks, see, I mark them as weeks, because I see this trajectory of each week has a different flavor. And when you say you wake up at 5, yeah, that would be my recommendation, is to get them back on a schedule to help them. But most of my kids and young adults, they're finding that they're sleeping in later and not sleeping through the night. They're on their phones. They don't know how to organize their brain. So it's just falling apart. But I appreciate, what would you do at 5? I'd be getting up at 5 and actually having a schedule of what I'm going to do. But the problem is that there's a lot of depression and anxiety. And when you work with high level athletes, they're so used to 6 to 7 hours a day of swimming or dry land. And they're not, you cut that off, they're like a fish out of water. They don't know what to do. Most of them just immediately go into a screen. because that's their avoidance, that's their way of coping. It's to numb out, it's to kind of stay on a focus, because they're so used to hyper focusing. That is the elite athlete. There's something about their brains that is driven for hyper focus, and swimming creates that. An endurance athlete creates it. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go walk for 45 minutes. That doesn't work on their brains. And so it puts them in a very big, very much a cognitive dissonance, I guess you could say. They can't organize their brain now. It goes out on these tangents, and then anxiety floods up. Because if you focus your brain, it puts the anxiety back. When they do research on mindfulness, they actually see that the brain lobes, the right side and the left side lights up when you're in that high level of focus.
So I've been working on different goals.
Yes.
So I do a lot of open water historical research. So I'm going, okay,
that is perfect.
For tomorrow morning, I'm going to try to get the information on 6 swimmers from the old days who swam Gibraltar that are not on the Gibraltar's official list. I'm going to do the Google research. I'm going to put together the package. I'm going to send it off to them.
That's
give
awesome.
them a week, and then I'm going to be all over them. Going to make a decision.
Yep, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. That is because you're using your creative brain. See, high-level athletes, one of the things that you'll see with a high-level athlete, elite, Olympic, they have this ability to flex. It's a sense of openness, a sense of ability. One person put it, I think the woman that wrote the book Grit, you got excellence and you've got perfectionism or something like that. And excellence isn't perfectionism, but they're kind of like a quality of the same. You don't want perfectionistic because that's so rigid. You want excellence, which is you stay open. You're able to do what you do. Take the energy and put it into something and get focused on it.
Okay, so we have probably, if we're lucky, 5 or 10 high-level Olympic quality marathon swimmers who might be listening to this. We hopefully will have dozens and dozens and dozens of 20 to 70-year-old marathon swimmers who have goals, some which will stretch them, some are in their more comfort zone. So probably the high-level Olympic athletes, probably the wrong description, because certainly I'm not one of those, but I've got goals that scare me.
Yes.
So in the same respect, there's got to be some similarity somewhere.
There's a lot of similarities. Our brain, it's, I always think of it as like what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing with swimmers. If you think about swimmers, all different levels, there's something that I've noticed in my work, but also in myself and others. There's almost like this gravitational pull towards water from a very young age. And so you can't really know, did they choose swimming or did swimming choose them, right? Because there's a quality that if you start looking at the patterns of swimmers, the personalities of swimmers, you're actually going to see some patterns that are very similar amongst whether you want to call them Olympic athletes, elite athletes, just recreational swimming. There's something about this. You look at, if you ever swim with a group of people, like in masters, right? And you could get all the personalities very quickly. And then there's many different personalities, but there's something about all of them that is pretty consistent. And that's one of the things is you're going to see a high level of sensory people. Some are more sensory sensitive oriented than others. Swimmers tend to be one of the most sensitive people.
Help me understand that, because I don't really understand what you mean by that.
Oh, by sensory?
Sensory.
My
hearing's kind of gone. My sense of smell, my eyes are shot. I'm getting old.
Exactly. But you still have the feel, you still have the ability, your touch, When you get into water, every single cell on your body is compressed. There's touch on everything. And what that does is it goes up the back of your spine, up into your basal brain stem, and through and into your limbic area, which is your emotional, very instinctual. And I don't think people understand, and this is why I got into the field I got into more so readily as I've gotten older than when I first started off, is our sensory system is really, people don't understand the importance of it. And when you get the sensory kids, the sensory adults, they're usually, ironically, but not so, scientists, mathematicians, engineers, very creative artists. You could get a lot of they're very sensitive people. They jump at a sound of a noise. They are anxious. They have a high level of just always running high. They tend to be very picky. They could be very particular. They need to have a sense of control because they feel oftentimes out of control. So our sensory system is bombarded constantly. The time you wake up to the time you go to sleep, you're bombarded by visual bits of information coming in visually, auditorily, tactily, smell, taste, all of that. Okay. So that creates a brain that is hypervigilant. It creates a brain that needs calming because it's so up all the time. Brains like swimmers oftentimes can't shut down. But the irony is that, through the research, they've studied swimmers' brains and they're the most calm because they're swimming as much as they are. They're getting the sensory input on so many levels that you won't get in other sports necessarily. And so the sensory system you talk about, our sensory system is a little bit more sensitive. We're able to pull in information so much quicker, so much faster. The problem is that when you're not moving your body, it becomes a brain body, a mind body issue.
So what you're saying is that the swimmers are wired a little different than the people
Very.
who play golf all day or go to the gym or shoot basketballs.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
a very different brain. It needs it's their meditation. It's their way of calming the brain, which tends to be very prickly.
So when I talk to marathon swimmers about what they think about during big swims, you get a range of answers, but there's a significant part of people who turn off their brain.
Yes.
They turn it off for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours and turn it back on again when their hand hits something.
Exactly.
There's other people who, God help me, they sing show tunes.
Yes.
And they got a reel of show tunes. There's a few of us who are really disturbed who count. which is kind of almost a Zen Buddhist kind of thing.
Exactly.
And I know it's about 950 right arm strokes before I get my next feed.
Yeah.
And at 970, I'm getting anxious.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
If it comes in at 930, I'm hoping they counted. I'm hoping they got the time wrong.
Well, what's so interesting, Ned, is as you talk, yes, everybody, there's people who do the singing, the people that can turn their brains off. Everybody has their thing, right? You talk about counting, okay? Well, counting is a left brain activity, and it's a very Zen thing. When I get my kids in the office that are very anxious and they might be explosive and they might be agitated and they can't organize their frontal lobes, so I start going up to my whiteboard and I write out mathematics like problems, so then it gets them to their left brain to calm themselves down. Okay. So you already are doing it on top of it, swimming.
And I know I'm in trouble when I can't count past 100 without getting confused. And I know I'm really in trouble for the Americans of a certain age. You'll understand that I do the Beverly Hillbillies count. I go 9, 10, 11, 11, 1, 11, 2, 11, 3. Now I know I'm in big, big trouble. I'm Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies.
And you're old because you just said that.
Well, I'm a young adult in your terminology. So, what besides getting up and having a plan, what should this mob of swimmers be doing?
This is an opportunity for them. It's going to be it could be quite tough. You know, I think oftentimes I think back to my what I talked to Steve about with regard to his twin daughters, and you know, high school brains are very different than our young adult brains, Ned. They can't see the big picture of things. You could see a big picture. I could see a big picture. Steve could see a big picture. They can't. So if I was to tell you what should we all do, well, it's going to be different for each age stage, I guess you could call it, because even when you're 40, you still have a different brain than when you were 30 and 20. And we see as we get older, there's a bit more wisdom that we have, an ability to see a bigger picture of sorts. So for our young adult age, it's finding the routine. It's being, I think it's an opportunity to look at internally and find an ability to see who we are outside of maybe these certain aspects of ourselves. I think we're so much more than just a swimmer, right? And a lot of kids when they're young and swim as much as they're doing, and even the elite athletes, they spend their whole existence in that sport. There's so much more to a person than that rigid badge that they might put on their chest and adhere it and go, this is me. No, that's not you. That's going to create a problem if you continually go down that road. Because you see some people who never grow up from swimming.
Really? Where would we find these people?
but they can't get out of that's who it is I am.
So one of the things that I'm forever doing is when one of the swimmers in my circle of friends does a big swim, and often it's the English Channel.
Yeah.
I call them about 3 days later after I've done the normal congratulations stuff. I call them about 3 days later, and for the men I have one thing I say to them. For the women I have two things I say to them. For the men I say to them, be careful. There's a reasonably high percentage of depression that runs through this sport. You've had this English Channel goal for 2 years. You get up every day, you train, you think about it, you worry, and now it's not there anymore. And you don't want to be in that position where there's no reason to get up in the morning. You need to have another goal. Now, it can be a 10K swim in a week, in a month, doesn't really matter, but you need something.
Yes.
Because you're probably goal driven. For the women, I say exactly the same thing, but for some women, I say one more thing. And if they're kind of between the ages of 25 and 35, it kind of really resonates. And I say, be careful, because you might not realize for about a month that you've actually swum the English Channel. And then one day you're going to wake up and it's going to hit you that you swam the English Channel. And you're going to be walking around with this sort of weird grin, which all men recognize as, I'm pregnant and no one else knows it grin. So you need to be careful. You don't scare the living daylights out of, whatever situation you're in your life, because you really have that little smile that we all recognize of going, she knows.
Yes.
So what's going to happen when we can all go back to the water?
That's such a great question. And I've pondered that, and I've thought that, and, how people get through this is going to branch in many different areas for people, how they get through this, how it challenges them, how it grows them. The people that I think will have the hardest time are the ones that kind of avoid, escape, and isolate maybe even more, and they all suffer through. when the pools open up, it's going to be interesting because in my image, it's like the pool's opening up. I don't know how that's going to even look like. And a lot of the teams aren't even going to be able to necessarily be able to meet and congregate for quite a while from what I'm hearing. But how will that look like? I think there'll be excitement for some, an ability to get back, but they're going to all be changed. I think this is something that just changes people. It's changes them in many ways to a positive, can maybe some of them might drop out. They might end up getting, I could give you an example. I have, in a situation where I had a young girl who was extremely talented, gifted swimmer, and she put in tons and tons of work. And all of a sudden something happened where her shoulder got ripped. And so it ended her career, and that both shoulders got ripped. And she actually, because she's such a high gifted athlete, but also extremely smart, didn't have the ability to know what to do. It just stopped. Everything stopped. And all she did was do a few things. She jumped into academia, and obsessively. And then at the same time, she started an eating disorder. And that's sometimes what I see with athletes is they, are they going to be able to climb back out of this? The ones that go in and avoid and escape, or start an OCD, they might not be able to come and get back to that. That might be a possibility. But that's young. When you're older, I think there's an ability to be able to go adjust, like you said. You're starting to do research on, the Straits of Gibraltar, all of that. You're using your creativity. You're going to be able to get back into the water and have stories to tell.
Well, maybe what some of us need to do is maybe we fall back to some of the old techniques, which just says you don't go to the pool, you don't go to the ocean alone anymore. You go out of your way to put together a carpool of 3 people.
Yes.
Because if you're showing up at 5:30 in the morning, Samantha will, in all likelihood, drag herself out of the house and get in the car because there's 2 other people who've come all the way to get Samantha.
Right. That's
and when
exactly
it's her turn to drive and she gets up at 5 in the morning and doesn't want to go, she's
Right.
going to say, there's 2 people waiting for me.
Yes.
And maybe we need for the first month a little extra peer pressure.
Peer pressure. It's getting everybody, trying to keep everybody together, and making sure you keep that line out there, and support each other on that level.
I noticed that I'm on an unbelievable number of WhatsApp groups, but I noticed a couple of days ago that all of my local WhatsApp groups were quiet for a full day. And that never happens. There's hundreds of messages a day. So I just sent out a message that said, did you throw me off the group?
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, you got pictures of people baking bread and, somebody's kid painted up as a rabbit. And, and all of a sudden they were kind of back in it. But there was a kind of this pause for people that before had kind of lived on, well, seemingly to me, they'd lived on WhatsApp.
Right.
And all of a sudden they just stopped.
Yep.
It was a very unusual kind of thing.
It is. It's interesting because, again, the focus, when you're swimming and you're with your group and you're swimming, you stay connected to that, because it's just what I found is this whole isolation thing, and even FaceTiming and Zooming is nothing compared to the texture of a face-to-face person, the emotion, the instinct, that is just, there's nothing like it. But when we all of a sudden are pulled into isolating and baking bread and being with a family, this other part of our life just gets cut off, because it's not like part of me thinks, if I keep it going, I want to think that they're, we're connected, but I'm so over here now. It's almost like we tend to be all or nothing, black or white at times, and to kind of keep the balance.
I'm missing two things about the swimming that are a little unusual. The first thing I'm missing is the mutual insulting that takes place at the end of the swimming pool.
Totally.
Like,
Oh my gosh.
come on, Bernard. Like,
Yes.
really, that swimsuit, you don't look good in any swimsuit, but that swimsuit, come on, that's
yes.
just really bad. That's why everyone's wore dark goggles to me,
yes.
Bernard, because
yes.
that swimsuit is just too much. Or in the ocean where there's this mad scramble to see who's going to win a race that isn't actually a race. There's people jumping off the wall to swim 2 strokes to declare that they've won. Or
yes.
somebody instead of going to the finish line,
I love it.
They've gone to the beach 50 meters off to the right so they could climb out first with their arms in the air and declare that they just won some sort of race that no one knew was happening.
Yes.
And I was just think it's absolutely a riot, particularly if I come in first, or I got the foot of somebody about to win. But all of that's gone now, and it's not the same on WhatsApp.
It's not. You can't get that. You cannot get that connection. And it's so fun because you sound, Ned, you are really funny. And I think swimmers have this wonderful sense of humor that you cannot find a lot of different places. And you said it and stated it very well about the nitpicking on each other and the rousing each other. And it's just, you can't get that. Absolutely can't. But yet when I think of, like, what would you do to help? You got to keep the humor. You have, the humor is everything. The humor is what we get. We don't take ourselves so seriously. It honestly helps us connect more than anything else, I think, because there's a sense of humor that is such a connector when everybody is laughing together.
Now there are some special places in the world. So the South End Rowing Club with this fabulous clubhouse, and you dress in the locker room and you come out and then you go back in the sauna. It's absolutely a wonderful experience. But most of the open water swimming that I do is you park your car, you wrap a towel around yourself, you try to get your blue jeans off, you try to get your swimsuit back on. If you're a water polo player, it's an advantage because we did this a couple of times a day. But then you're putting grease on yourself. Typically the swimsuit you put on, somebody can smell it across the parking lot because it's been in the car for a week. And you can't be a prima donna in an environment where you're putting Vaseline under your armpit. It isn't possible.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right. And that's the swimming that you do up where the water is really cold.
Although I have to say, I can swim in cold water. I don't like cold water, but I can do it, and I often do it. So in some ways, I'm really thankful that the coronavirus hit in February and March, our 2 coldest months of the year in the ocean. But I was just getting half used to it because it really comes down those 2 months. And April's usually pretty nice, and May's usually a nice month. So in a certain respect, thankfully, it wasn't July and August for us.
Absolutely. See, and that's one of the things you need to look at too, is I think it's an ability to not only get some self-awareness on ourselves, but also learn to change our perspective. When I work with people just in general, people can be very rigid in their thinking, and especially when you're anxious, and anxiety tends to come from a lot of the unknown. And that's where really it gets bred, is when something is unknown, like the coronavirus. It's an unknown thing, so anxiety is up. But the whole idea is being able to reflect and see, and also come up with other ways, perspectives. You got to switch the perspective. What are we thankful for? What can we learn out of this? What can I learn about, Gibraltar? What can I learn about whatever it might be? Because there's so many more aspects to us, like I said, than just swimming. Maybe you use swimming to find the next niche, but what happens when college swimmers, you think about this, high-level college swimmers, they end their career, what do?
They typically vanish for 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years, typically.
Right. exactly. But, and what do they do in the between time? How do they become the successful person? Do they come into kind of maybe not so much and getting into an addiction? What happens to them? And that's kind of a thing that you could see with the coronavirus. It's like put a halt on everything. What are people going to do? It's usually the people that take all of that intensity and all of that energy that goes on in them, and they drive it into something else that is just as powerful. Something to learn, something to grow their brain, something. That's generally what they do. Those are the successful ones. Some of them don't do that.
So we often take aspiring marathoners, and we advise them to go out and get some professional help for things like visualization
Yes,
and self-belief.
absolutely.
When the insults in the ocean in the pool aren't working for them, and our group is unable to get through them, we say go find somebody, and we have a short list of people that have
Yes,
done that professionally in the area.
good,
We also, by the way, tell them to get a physio and a deep tissue
perfect.
massage person. They're probably going to need that as well for a
Yeah.
different thing. Is that same kind of advice and help available as we come out of this corona thing? Because we're going to have 0.5% of our swimmers that go into some sort of funk or threaten to disappear on us.
They will.
Can we send it to the same people, or is it a different professional in this psychology area?
Well, the what you talk about is sports psychology. And
Okay.
there are definite people that focus on that with the athlete in mind, because I do, like you said, I work with a lot of athletes, swimmers that I even train with, that I've recommended, here, you need to go see somebody because there's something up here that's keeping you from being able to. You could see the talent in them, you could see the gift, but they're blocking, and you got to get them off to somebody to create and change their perspective.
Okay.
But yes, we do deal with that. That's in our area, especially. There's a lot of triathletes
who've lost their 4 or 5 Garmin watches, and they're now lost.
It actually, what's
Sorry,
interesting
no, that was a cheap shot. Sorry about that.
No. But it kind of reminds me of the situation just a few back in March, when one of my teammates, she's a what is it called? Atelier, a swim runner. So have you heard that?
Yeah, swim run person. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got shoes she swims with.
Yes, she swims with shoes and paddles. And they did this a world event in Catalina, and she's very gifted. Her team was very gifted. They're going up against the Swedes. The Swedes hold all the records, and they were, their platform, getting up on the podium. They're podium people, but her goggles broke. So usually there, when psychologically you look at that, if you're psychologically fluid, you're able to deal and stay in the focus, stay in the zone. But she lost it, and she couldn't get it back for the whole race. And so I sent her to a sports psychologist, because that is part of her nature. That's kind of the way she's made. She needs to deal with it.
We well, I certainly do it once or twice a year, and I advise a lot of people do it. Steve would know, we swim around an island, and halfway around the island, you've got another 800 meters to go. A couple of times a year, I take my goggles off, put them in the back of my swimsuit, and finish the swim. Because I know in a month or two, whatever, some rogue wave is going to take them off when I'm not ready. So it's not going to hurt you to swim a couple of times a year for 800 meters without your goggles.
Right.
And then when it happens at a different, more important time, you go, okay, I remember this.
Perfect. And you said it so well. I mean, again, you in your young adulthood years, got all what is required to get through a rough spot. That's what makes, we're resilient. We have a brain that thinks, we think ahead, a chess game. What can we do to prepare ourselves for any sort of situation so that when we're in it, we've been there. And that's what I would, on some level, how do you get through this whole situation? Well, you kind of start doing some internal digging in, and how resilient are you?
So you've actually triggered something in me. We have a few people who have never been injured, who have never missed a week of swimming, who have never missed a practice. They've never been injured. They've never gone off for some strange holiday for three weeks. And then you get people, Steve, you'll know the exact number, but the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame honoree Tommy Stefanowski from Macedonia had 7 major shoulder surgeries, Steve? Some big number like that. He must have spent a lot of time out of the water thinking about getting back in. So he probably has a huge resilience to this kind of delay. But if you've never missed a workout in 25 years, you're probably my person at risk, because you don't know how to get back.
It's exactly right. And that's
you've never done
exactly
it.
what they say. I want my clients to go through pain. I want them to go through some suffering. I want them to understand that if they don't go through it, they're going to be more handicapped later than if they are now. Resilience is everything.
Okay. So we've just about come to the end of the program. So I'll give you a chance to make any final comments, but just one thing I wanted to check with you, because a lot of the women that we swim with in the open water, they're 100% of the opinion that cake after a swim solves all. Is there a sound psychological basis for their belief?
Oh no, that I've never heard of. Never heard of cake.
And you're a professional in this field?
But not in cake. I'm not a professional in cake. Cravings, I would say it's physiological.
I will connect you with some of these ladies, and they will help you with your postdoctorate education.
Oh, thank you.
Any final comments for everybody?
I don't think so.
So thank you very much, and we hope that your kids, adolescents, and young adults come back all raring to go and well adjusted.
I agree.
Enjoy your summer.
And you too. Take good care. Bye-bye.